My name is Hayssam. We've got a 20-minute talk now together about SEO performance using Jahia. I'm going to try to go straight to the point so we can get on time for lunch and leave at least a couple of minutes for a few questions. So let me just introduce myself. I work at eBizNext, and we're a company doing a lot of Jahia integration for a few years now. And what I'm going to describe here is about a couple of projects we had to implement, and where our customers were really aware that they need to have the best performance to get a good Google ranking. So I'm going to explain why performance matters, what measure they had to use to be sure that it means something, why we're getting a lot of performance issues, the solution we used, the classical one probably we were using, and finally how we managed to do it efficiently. So first, using Jahia, when we addressed the point and looked around us, we needed to be below the 500 milliseconds answer. Meaning that any page accessed, any document accessed by the internet user should be below the 500 milliseconds. Anything above would decrease the performance of our site, I mean, businessly speaking. And you know, performance is always very, very important to your customer and to mine too. When I go to my manager and tell him, yeah, I got 1% increase or 2% increase in performance, but there's a little, I put a little, some crap in the code. He says, okay, no big deal, just add some few comments. We are increasing the performance, that's important. So, and performance is important. It's above everything most of the time, and this is probably one of the only segment when you accept to set quality aside is that because you're gaining performance. So the architecture we wanted to set is any page should be answered, any request should be answered within the 500 milliseconds. So unfortunately, we wanted to do more and more, and doing more means doing less. First, when your platform, whatever it is, need to build a page, you have many areas that it should gather together, build a page, you know, this section is an Ajax call, this section is probably something else, and it takes time. And it takes time because it goes through a lot of, you know, layers, and these layers, you know, are most of the time responsible of the performance issues. How do we handle it? How it works? But first answer we had is, okay, let's use EH-cache. You know that EH-cache is a standard in Jahia. The first problem is that it doesn't solve the first time access. The ranking, the SEO, which was coming at any time in the day, most of the time got 5-6 second time to download the page. So we got a very bad ranking, and putting it using EH-cache would solve the second access, but not the first one. So that would decrease the SEO regarding performance. Second point, we got to have you know, increase the JVM memory, which decrease itself performance by itself. You know, when you have 100,000 pages to serve, that's a lot of data in cache. And we also need to synchronize the servers. You know, EH-cache needs to synchronize the servers between calls. The second solution we had to use, we tried is use a front-end cache. A front-end cache is, you know, putting a varnish or Nginx in front of the user. However, we needed to build the pages in batch, and we couldn't handle real-time updates. That was the very first issue we faced. The second issue was that we couldn't handle single-page application cleanly. Yeah, why? Why are you saying this? We had a lot of Ajax calls inside on the client, and when you put your page on the cache, you do not make the Ajax calls from the server side. I mean, I'm sure everybody understands that. So we were not increasing performance, and also, as you may know, a lot of Ajax calls inside your HTML page makes your SEO performance very bad because you don't have the real content in the page when the content is downloaded. So to solve that, the very first idea comes, okay, let's create a second version of our site that is full JSP, everything is done on the server side, there is no Ajax calls, and this site is dedicated to the crawler, the Google search engine. That would, okay, my boss loves this because it's a lot of work and we get paid for that, but at the end of the day, it's not the right way to do that. More coding is definitely not the right way of doing it. So the short answer is, how did we do that? Simply put, we put okay, it's just an image, but we're gonna come to the real solution. We just put a browser on the server. We preload the server side into the server side browser the whole Jahia content, and the end user, in fact, access the server side browser cache. Okay, so which means that at first, on the first access, when you go to the browser cache, you in fact have the final DOM, right? Document Object Model, which is the final content. And that solves the single page application, since all Ajax calls are already done by the browser on the server side. So say, okay, guys, come on, what are you talking about? Are you putting a browser on the server and telling us that everybody getting access to the cache of this browser? That's not going to make it right. But the idea was there, is that we needed everything the browser were able to create on the client side, we needed to have it on the server side before serving it. And that's bring me to the final cache architecture we set. And what do we do? And the tools we used was almost simple. So what you have is, first you have an HTTP call that comes to the cache, okay, as usual. If the page is not there, you have a cache miss. The cache miss then goes to Jahia, and Jahia then serves the content, and the data is put in the cache again. That's the classical way of doing it. So first, it doesn't solve two problems. It doesn't solve the first problem, that is the first access, okay, since we have a cache miss at the first access. And the second point it doesn't solve is the single page application where we have Ajax calls. So to solve those two problems, we've got a batch right here that's going to access the GCR, compute the whole list of URL accessed by the end user. And we've got a bunch of Phantom.js. Who is familiar with Phantom.js or doesn't know about it? Okay. And who is not familiar with Phantom.js? Okay. Phantom.js is nothing else than Google and Safari engine, browser engine packed inside the jar. Okay, in fact, it's packed as C++ component. And without the user interface. So whatever call you make through Phantom.js to a URL gets you back the document object model as it will be displayed on the final browser. Okay? So what we had to do here is very simple. We put a bunch of Phantom.js right here. Every day at 2 a.m., we pre-compute the list of URLs. We call Phantom.js that access the website, get the data from the website. They got the DOM. They put the DOM back inside the cache. So what we have now is the real content for a URL that would be displayed on the final page. So we already have prepared the whole HTML and JavaScript right after all Ajax calls have been made, ready. So when our end user comes, since we pre-computed everything, he gets there, and by getting there, we know that everything is in the cache. We send back the whole content without any Ajax calls needed to be executed on the browser side. Everything is already prepared. That's bringing us most of the time 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds time. And that relieves Jahia of a lot of tasks and to handle performance. We needed to do that for large e-commerce websites and large content provider that were used to to sell their content and needed to be indexed on Google and need to have the very high ranking. That's not the whole story. Sometimes the content right here gets updated. Then what we have is a listener in Jahia, but I already talked about it last year, and if you go back to this paper, to the talk I submitted last year, you would see this. So mostly talked about everything. Finally, what we do is simply put the DOM in the content, in the cache, and the cache key is the URL. And whenever this URL is requested, the DOM content is sent back to the browser that only need to display it. Finally, we love SEO, and the customer love it because I just want to remind you, our objective is to be below the 500 milliseconds. So we were almost all the time below the 500 milliseconds for any Jahia contents accessed by the end user. And finally, preloading the content on the cache allowed us full-time access, first-time access at full speed for the SEO crawlers. First stuff. And building the cache content using the WebKit engine. WebKit is the engine of your browser, okay? Google or Safari, okay? The WebKit engine with Phantom.js was just already preparing all the job the browser will use to do on the server side, okay? And I can't say that, what I can say is that without the open source architecture of Jahia, we couldn't have done it, and the modular architecture. So that's what really helped us. This is it. 15 minutes have passed, so thank you very much. So we've got 5 minutes questions, so please, any question? Yes. Okay. We send back the HTML stuff. So the HTML is generated by WebKit engine, and we had to be sure that the HTML we generate is cross-browser, which you do usually already. Okay. So you don't lose what you have in your CSS. Meaning, if your CSS or HTML, you use specific stuff for Internet Explorer and specific stuff for Chrome, they are still there, but they are rendered differently. So you're still, you are not rendering on the web server side. You are preparing the content the browser is going to render. So nothing changed there. The content is always the same, whatever the browser you have. It's what you render that differs. Yes? Right, exactly. But you put both on your browser, and depending on your browser, if you have the JavaScript, if then else, it's still there. Okay, you don't use it. You use your CSS or something like that. You're not going to use it. You do it in JavaScript then. So you got to be aware of that. Yeah, we push the only resources that get affected by the change, not the whole cache. Only the resources affected by the change. You get okay. Maybe I went a little bit too fast here, but last year at Jahia 2014, I talked about the listener on EH cache that you have inside Jahia. So in Jahia, you can put a listener that get called whenever a resource has changed, right? So right from here, you can get the resource that has been changed and do the push on this resource only. Now you have to, you know which resource on your GCR has been changed, you know how your GCR is structured, you know the impact of which node, depend on which node. I mean, then it becomes functional. Okay, so you know your system, you know your GCR, then you can detect which nodes are affected and then clean them. This stuff right here, your push policy depends on your content, right? Definitely. The whole list is completely generic, Even building your URL depends on your content structure too. So this list of URL we build here depend on the content structure too. So, okay. You know this cache right here? Okay. In fact, for the first customer, it's a varnish cache. And for the second customer, we use Nginx cache. And we were really surprised how Nginx cache was really performing well. Okay. So I don't want to say go guys for Nginx, but it was doing very, very well. And we got at the end of the day a server. Even the load balancing here is written in French, which means load balancing was made by Nginx itself too. Okay. So we simplified the stack a lot. And we used a feature that is newly available. That's why the first customer was still on Varnish cache. A newly available feature on Nginx cache that allows you to purge a single resource only and not the whole cache, which was not available before. Any more questions? So then, bon appétit tout le monde.